Hi, and welcome to lesson 3 of basic HTML and CSS. In this lesson, we're going to really take a deep dive into two essential HTML elements that you'll need for every web page or website that you build. So we're going to take a look at anchors and images. These are two really important elements. What we'll try to achieve today is we'll learn what an HTML attribute is and sort of how those relate to anchors and images. And then we will link multiple pages together. Okay, so we just started with a single index.html page. We will begin thinking about how multiple pages actually link together. What you'll need for this lesson, you'll need, of course, a web browser as always, your text editor of choice as always, and you can download the lesson 3 zip file if you would like. I will provide the before and after zip files that will contain all of the files that you need for this lesson. So let's quickly go over the anatomy of an HTML tag. This is sort of review from the last lesson, but all HTML tags will typically have at least two components. Okay, we've got an opening tag. That's those predefined finite library of tags that we talked about in the last lesson. So here's an example of an opening H1 tag or heading 1 tag. You've got the content that goes in between the opening and closing tag. That's what actually appears on the page, and the closing tag, the H1 closing tag. So just to kind of reiterate, again, all HTML is doing is it's describing the content, right? So the H1 doesn't actually show up on the page. It's just describing to the browser that what this piece of content is a first level heading. That is a basic HTML tag. Let's talk about tags that require attributes. So there's certain tags that require more information than just defining that particular piece of content. So the first one we'll look at is what's called an anchor tag. Anchor tags provide links to internal or external pages or to files like PDFs, for example, if you were to link a PDF on your website. So you'll notice that we have an opening and closing tag. The A opens here and closes here. But what is an additional component to the anchor tag is both an attribute and a value. So anchor tags must have an attribute that looks like this in red, and it's href, which is short for hypertext reference. Okay, so we're just, the attribute is a reference to some other web component, and the value is defining what we're linking to. Okay, so opening tag A, our attribute is href. Oops, our attribute is href, and our value here is google.com. And then we close our tag. Okay, a couple things to note. In our value, we wrap our value in quotation marks. So that's an important thing to know. So you'll notice our opening tag now is really long. It's longer than your typical opening tag that you see here with just an H1. The content is what appears on the page. So this is a link to Google, would appear on the web page. And then we have the closing tag. Now what happens is this would be a link and we'd be able to click this and it would take us to google.com. Okay. So again, anchor tags require attributes and values. Let's take a look at an image tag. The image tag displays an image file. It renders the image on the web page. And obviously this is going to be really important in web design, as it would be pretty boring just to list out a bunch of text on a web page. Using images communicates all kinds of different things to our audience. So we want to use images as much as we can. So images must have at least 2 attributes. So the first attribute is the source attribute. So it's similar to the href in that we're defining the source of the image. So where is the image coming from, or what is the name of the file? That's our value. So dog.jpg. So this is a JPEG of a dog. Another attribute that's required for image tags, it's not required for the image tag to actually appear, but it's required for good accessibility. This is for screen readers, for people who are visually impaired, is the alt tag. This is an attribute that defines what the actual image is. The alt tag will have also a value like every other attribute, and the value can be anything you want, but you're going to want to describe the image itself. Okay, you'll notice that there's no closing image tag. No closing tag for images. Images are what are called self-closing tags. You don't need the /img to close out an image tag. So that's a little bit different than some of the other tags we've looked at. Okay, so if you need to rewatch that first section, I know it's a little bit confusing. Please do before, and make sure you're comfortable before we jump into some code. So let's jump into some code. This is where we left off. We left off with this just basic HTML file that had some headings and had an ordered list and a paragraph tag. So what we're going to do is we're going to open the index.html file. That's the wrong. With our text editor of choice. So we'll open it with, why is it? It's laggy. We're going to open it in Sublime Text. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger for you. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add an image tag. So at the very top before my Christmas list, I'm going to add an image tag. And in the zip file that comes along with the lesson, there'll be 2 images in the zip file. One called dog.jpg and one called dog-2.jpg. You can use those, or you can go and download some images off the web if you want. That is up to you. But let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to open our image tag. We're going to add our attribute source. And we're going to define our source, dog.jpg. So that is our first image file. And let's take a look at it so we can describe it in our alt tag. So here's the image that we're going to link. So we're going to add another attribute, the alt attribute. So alt equals, I think this is a golden retriever with a flower in its mouth. Okay, so we want to be as descriptive as possible in our alt tag. Okay, so I'm going to save that, and this has all of the components that we need to display this image on the web page. So let's refresh, and we should see a pretty giant image, and we're not going to resize this. We'll resize this maybe in the next video, but we'll just keep this here for now. We've got our giant dog image. Cute. All right, now we're going to add one more image. The second image is, I think that's a Cocker Spaniel. So we're just going to do, and we'll put this one at the bottom. image tag, and we're going to add our attribute of source. We're going to do dog-2.jpg. That's the source of our file. And we're going to add some alt information, Cocker Spaniel. Okay, so that has all of the required components of a image tag. And I'm going to save, and I'm going to refresh in the browser, and we should be able to see this Cocker Spaniel. Perfect. Looks good. All right. So a little bit oversized, but that's okay. The other thing I wanted to mention is, and we'll do a full lesson on linking and relative versus absolute linking. But you'll notice that our source is just the name of the file. And the reason why our source can be the name of the file is because these images are in the same folder as our index.html, as our HTML file. If we were to create a folder and name it images or IMG and move these two photos into that folder, these links would break. Okay, our source no longer shows up. But what does show up, you'll notice, is the alt text, right? So for broken images, even if the image is linked or the source is linked to the wrong location, our alt text is showing up. So that's why the alt text is important. But if we wanted to properly link, we would just have to add that folder path. So we could do img/dog.jpg, and we could do the same thing for the bottom one. So now our source is the image folder and then the actual JPEG image. So we can refresh and they're going to show up again. Okay, so that's an important thing to understand is our source is dependent on where the file is located. Okay, the next thing we'll do is we're going to add one more page to our website here, and we're going to link to it. And so what we'll do is we'll create a new file in Sublime Text, and I'm going to save it in the same folder, and I'm going to name it page-2.html. Okay. I'm actually going to go back into our index, and I'm going to copy the entire code from our index and paste it into page-2. Now I'm going to change the title, my second web page. I'm going to delete everything inside of the body tag. And I'm just going to add a heading that says, this is my second web page. Okay, so very simple. It's got all of the same structure as the first index, but it has it just has that second level heading. This is my second web page. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to link. We're going to go back to index.html, and at the very top, we're going to create a link or an anchor tag. So we're going to open our anchor, and we're going to use the proper attribute href, and we're going to just link to page-2.html. Okay, and then I'm going to display page 2 on the website, and then I'm going to close my anchor tag. Okay, so now we can refresh, and you'll see at the very top this should take us to page 2, and it does. Now I'm going to go into page 2, and at the very top I am going to add an anchor tag but this time I'm going to link it back to index. And I'm going to call this the home page. Okay, so again, my attribute is href. My value is index.html. So now when we refresh, we'll see this will link us back to the home page. Okay, so this is our first example of what's called a navigation bar. Very crude, very ugly, but it works, right? So we can click back between our home page and our page 2. So that's all I have for this lesson. Please feel free to add more HTML elements, more links, more images, whatever you'd like. In the next lesson, we are going to start actually building out our portfolio now that we've got sort of a good basis for HTML and a good understanding of the main tags that we're going to use. So that's all I have for this one. We'll see you in the next lesson.